And Donald Trump's imminent return to power marks the end of Joe Biden's one term in office. He's made a big announcement on his way out, issuing preemptive pardons for Dr. Anthony Fauci, who helped lead the fight against COVID-19, and former Joint Chief of Staff, Chairman General Mark Milley. Other pardons went to members of Congress who investigated the January 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol. Mr. Biden also spent recent days reminding Americans of his successes. But like many presidents before him, his failures may be harder to forget. Nick Harper reports from Washington, D.C.
My fellow Americans,
Joe Biden's presidency started with hope.
This is Democracy's Day, a day of history and hope, of renewal and resolve.
Hope for change at a time when the United States was awash with COVID-19 and barreling towards the highest inflation levels in decades. President Biden inherited a broken country, divided politically, hurting racially, and aching for normalcy after months of the COVID-19 pandemic. He promised to repair and heal America. But some feel much of the last 4 years has been overshadowed by the events of the last few months.
Dealing with
a disastrous debate against Donald Trump in June. A sense of declining health and verbal slips at the NATO summit in July.
And now I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin.
And the decision to suspend his White House bid just 3 months before the election.
So I've decided the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation.
That torch passed to his Vice President Kamala Harris, who didn't have time on her side and ended up losing to Donald Trump.
He doomed the Democratic ticket in 2024 is going to be one of the stories. Once you dig underneath that, though, I mean, there's a lot of things that he did, including some of the sort of most progressive policies that any president has done.
That included gun legislation, student debt relief, the enormous Inflation Reduction Act with its raft of climate change initiatives, and the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill.
You know, there was consequential legislation passed, but it certainly didn't help Biden's popularity. You go through, much of American political history, it's sort of hard to find instances where a party got really a lot of credit for the things that they passed.
It's good to see you again.
Away from home, Joe Biden tried to orientate his foreign policy towards the Indo-Pacific to counter the growing influence of China. He saw successes, reviving the Quad security grouping of the US, Australia, Japan and India, achieving a submarine deal between the US, UK and Australia, and holding a historic US, Japan, South Korea trilateral. For a politician steeped in foreign policy experience, it was global problems that upended his presidency. The bungled withdrawal from Afghanistan in 2021 left lasting damage on Washington's reputation, and foreign wars on his watch in Ukraine and Gaza created a bubbling resentment for money spent on foreign conflicts at a time of raging inflation and a perceived disregard for the Palestinian people.
It created a sense, a kind of ironic sense, that here was this incredibly experienced foreign policy hand who was incapable, ultimately, of resolving these conflicts. And I think that contradiction between people's hopes, right, and then the reality, I think that will also be part of his legacy.
Some may argue he was never dealt a strong hand. Biden, in his farewell address, clearly hopes history, in the long term, will judge him more kindly.
It will take time to feel the full impact of all we've done together. But the seeds are planted, and they'll grow and they'll bloom for decades to come.
When Joe Biden leaves the White House, the curtain comes down on 50 years of political life. But his legacy will be debated for many years to come, as Americans, historians and the world weigh up the successes and failures of his one-term presidency. Nick Harper, CNA, Washington.